the separatist WEXIT party. He replaces Peter Downing, who recently resigned.
We're going to make Alberta great again, and that is when we cut ourselves off from the leech that is Eastern Canada.
Ottawa lights the fuse. So something just blew up on Canada's political map, and not the way Ottawa planned. The Western provinces didn't just walk out of a meeting, they were thrown out, literally kicked out of what was supposed to be a national unity session.
And it's not just Alberta, it's not just Sask. Parts of BC are expressing interest, along with Manitoba. So this is what's known as WEXIT, literally a Western exit from the Confederation.
And let's be honest, Trudeau didn't see this coming. The media's scrambling. The Liberals are in panic mode. Oh, the West is fired up like never before. Global News is reporting that the whole thing went down during a closed-door session in Ottawa, where Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba were supposed to collaborate on national energy and trade policy. Translation: Ottawa talks, the West listens, nothing changes. The moment it went nuclear.
Now, the Premier says the province will hold public consultations on nuclear power and whether it should be added to Alberta's energy mix. The province is currently reliant on natural gas for electricity, but the Premier says nuclear power could be good for oil sands projects.
According to multiple reporters in the room, Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith wasn't in the mood for scripted talking points. She dropped a bomb. If you won't let us build pipelines,
we're signing 2 memorandums of understanding that will see us advance pipelines and pathways.
If you won't respect our industries, and if you keep draining our revenues, maybe we should be having a different conversation about our place in this country. Cue the collective gasp from the east side of the table. Saskatchewan's Scott Moe backed her up instantly, calling Ottawa's economic chokehold a national crisis in the making. Manitoba's reps nodded along. The temperature in the room hit boiling in seconds. And then security shows up. Cameras catch staff whispering to ministers. Next thing you know, the Western Bloc is being escorted out, the political equivalent of a bouncer walking you to the sidewalk. Ottawa's big misread. For years, Ottawa's playbook has been simple. Treat Western separatism like a bad joke. Ignore it, mock it, call it fringe, and it'll go away. Well, not anymore. The WEXIT movement was already gaining traction before this little stunt, and now it's on steroids. A new Angus Reid poll shows 40% of Albertans support independence. In Saskatchewan, it's 33%. Among Conservatives, that number in Alberta spikes to 65%. That's not a protest vote. That's a political base. And here's the kicker. Manitoba, the quiet prairie province, is suddenly in the conversation, too. The history Ottawa pretends to forget. This isn't the first time the West has been shoved aside. Go back to the 1980s. Pierre Trudeau's National Energy Program. Ottawa slapped taxes and controls on Alberta's oil, tanking the economy. Unemployment exploded. Thousands left the province. The scars from that policy still shape Alberta politics today. Fast forward to now, and the sequel's playing out. Carbon taxes, pipeline shutdowns, court delays, and equalization payments that bleed Alberta for $17 billion a year more than it gets back. Saskatchewan sees the same pattern in agriculture, where federal climate rules are crippling farm margins. Why this was a gift to WEXIT. The visuals are brutal for Ottawa. 3 provinces, representing 6.5 million Canadians, literally shown the door in their own national capital. If you're trying to prove you take the West seriously, this is the last thing you do. WEXIT leaders are already capitalizing. Billboards are going up in Alberta. Thrown out, time to walk out. Social media accounts are exploding with new followers. And guess who else is paying attention? U.S. politicians. Texas Senator Ted Cruz just tweeted about Western Canada's fight for energy freedom. That's how fast this story's moving. The media spin machine kicks in. Within hours, CBC was running unity panels. You know the type. Academics from Toronto telling the West how they should feel. Words like dangerous populism and American interference got thrown around a lot.
For example, how it seems at every turn Alberta is blocked from getting its oil to market. How to the West it seems that Ottawa is not paying attention to their needs, their cries for the government to do something, spawning a movement called WEXIT. And now we have a new U.S. administration which immediately canceled the Keystone XL pipeline.
And of course, Trump's name came up. because apparently everything west of Manitoba is just a Fox News segment waiting to happen. But here's the problem for Ottawa. The more they dismiss the West, the stronger the movement gets. People aren't forgetting. They're angry, they're organized, and now they've got a viral moment as proof that Ottawa doesn't want to hear from them. The economics Ottawa can't ignore. Alberta pumps 4.2 million barrels of oil a day. Saskatchewan produces enough grain and potash to keep half the world fed. Manitoba sells hydroelectric power straight into U.S. markets. Take those provinces out of the federation, and equalization payments collapse. Quebec's $13 billion annual check, gone. Ottawa's deficit, blown wide open. This is why the fringe label doesn't work anymore. The West doesn't just have grievances, it has leverage. Now, why this moment matters. This isn't just another political spat. This is a line in the sand. The WEXIT movement has gone from talk radio chatter to front page news, and now it has a rallying cry. They threw us out.
It's not about having a Liberal from Alberta on an advisory team. No, it's about issues, and it's about, in particular, energy issues.
Ottawa wanted to control the narrative. Instead, they've handed the West the most powerful political ad imaginable, and it didn't cost them a dime. Next, in part two, we'll go behind the closed doors of that Ottawa meeting, look at the proposals Ottawa refused to even table, and reveal why some federal ministers are calling this the biggest national unity crisis since Quebec's 1995 referendum. Behind closed doors, Ottawa's WEXIT panic. So, you've seen the footage of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba getting walked out of the national unity meeting, but what you didn't see until now is what went down inside that room before it all blew up. Because according to multiple leaks and a couple of very loose-lipped staffers, the West didn't come to Ottawa just to complain. They came armed, not with picket signs, with policy, actual detailed proposals on how to fix the mess. And Ottawa wouldn't even let them hit the table.
And reposition in terms of their policies, particularly on the energy fund.
The proposals Ottawa refused to hear. Alberta's pitch: a streamlined federal approval process for pipelines, no more than 18 months from submission to shovel in the ground. Saskatchewan's: a permanent exemption for prairie farmers from new fertilizer and carbon rules, citing skyrocketing input costs and global food demand. Manitoba's: a guaranteed export corridor for hydropower to the U.S. All three proposals were backed by economic impact studies, private sector endorsements, and in Alberta's case, a 50-page binder of investor commitments contingent on Ottawa's approval. In Ottawa's response: these are outside the scope of today's discussion. Outside the scope. At a meeting about national economic strategy, you can't make this up. The moment the switch flipped. That's when Danielle Smith dropped her now famous line: and if solving our energy crisis is outside the scope, maybe this federation is too. Scott Moe followed up: if you won't put these proposals on the agenda, maybe you don't want us at the table at all. And here's the thing, they weren't bluffing. Manitoba's rep, usually the quiet one, jumped in with a warning that prairie patience was measured in months, not years. The temperature in the room went from awkward to volcanic in about 15 seconds. Ottawa's unity strategy. Here's what we now know. Ottawa came into that meeting with a unity plan, all right, just not the one the West thought. The goal wasn't to negotiate, it was to lock in a new federal climate and trade framework before the next election, with or without provincial buy-in. How do we know? Because a leaked briefing note from the PMO literally states, provinces may resist, proceed regardless. That's not unity, that's a power play, and it blew up in their faces. The political dominoes start falling. Within hours of the expulsion, separatist leaders were holding press conferences back home. The Alberta Prosperity Project called it the most public proof yet that Ottawa will never treat the West as an equal partner. Saskatchewan first said, we're now in the countdown phase of separation. And here's a stat Ottawa really doesn't want on the evening news. A Snap poll by Prairie Politics found that 62% of Albertans and 55% of Saskatchewanians now believe separation should be seriously considered.
Have one. Let's let the people have their say and put the issue to rest. Either Albertans want it or they don't, but let's schedule it. Let's articulate our arguments for and against, and let's let democracy have a say.
That's up double digits from just last month. Well, the Quebec factor. And if you think this is just a Western story, think again. Word is, some senior figures in the Parti Québécois have already reached out to prairie politicians saying, hey, if you're serious about sovereignty, we've got a playbook. Let that sink in. If Alberta or Saskatchewan makes a real move toward independence, Quebec's separatist movement, which Ottawa's kept barely contained for decades, will come roaring back. And suddenly you've got not one but two independence referendums hanging over the country. The U.S. watches closely. Oh, and did I mention Washington's paying attention? Because they are. A Congressional Energy Subcommittee member told reporters that a resource-rich Western region aligning more closely with U.S. markets would be a natural economic evolution. Translation, they'd welcome it. It's not hard to see why. Alberta already sends more oil to U.S. refineries than some OPEC nations. Saskatchewan's grain fills American railcars year-round. Manitoba's hydro powers Minnesota and North Dakota. If you think U.S. politicians aren't seeing opportunity here, you're kidding yourself. Ottawa's media firebreak fails. Predictably, within hours of the blow-up, the PMO was speed-dialing friendly media. The talking points were obvious: dangerous rhetoric, American-style division, risk to democracy. CBC panels were stacked with Unity academics. The Globe and Mail ran an editorial calling the premiers reckless, and some Liberal MPs tried blaming foreign interference for the WEXIT surge. But it's not sticking. Out west, people aren't buying the fear campaign anymore. They've heard it all before. It's in 1980, in 2015, in 2020. The scare tactics don't land when your industry's already been strangled and your tax dollars shipped east with nothing to show for it. Why Ottawa should be worried? Because this isn't just emotional politics, it's math. Hard, ugly math for the feds. Remove Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba from Confederation, and you don't just lose 3 provinces, you lose roughly 35% of Canada's export value and more than 40% of its net energy output. You think the deficit's bad now? Try replacing $17 billion in lost equalization without raising taxes in Ontario and Quebec. Good luck selling that. The clock is ticking. Ottawa's problem is that the West isn't bluffing anymore. Bill 54 in Alberta lowered the signature threshold for a referendum from 600,000 to just 177,000. That's fewer people than show up at a Rough Riders game.
The decision is a win for Albertans who want to stay in Canada. It means the group pushing for separation has to have its referendum question reviewed by a judge before it can start collecting signatures to get it on a ballot. The separatist group Alberta Prosperity Project wants to ask Albertans whether they want to leave Canada and become a sovereign nation.
The Alberta Prosperity Project says they could hit that number in weeks, not months. Saskatchewan is quietly drafting its own sovereignty legislation, and Manitoba's Independence Caucus just doubled in size. The fuse has been lit, and Ottawa was the one holding the match. Coming in part 3, we'll break down what an actual prairie separation could look like, the economic shockwaves it would send through Canada, and why some analysts are saying this could redraw the map of North America in real time. What happens if the West really walks?
Back here at home, Western separation, or WEXIT, as it has become known since the election, was on the minds of hundreds of people in Edmonton this weekend.
So let's play this out. Because after watching Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba literally get shown the door in Ottawa, the question isn't if they could leave anymore. It's what happens when they do. And here's the spoiler. This isn't just some protest vote fantasy. This is a real plausible scenario with the power to redraw the map of North America. Step 1, the referendum.
The Conservative Party leader won the Battle River Crowfoot by-election Monday night with about 80% of the vote.
It starts with Alberta. Bill 54 has already slashed the signature threshold for a referendum from 600,000 to just 177,000. That's a long weekend of collecting names at Calgary Stampede and Edmonton Oilers games. The Alberta Prosperity Project says they'll have it done by summer 2026, if not sooner. The question? Something straight to the point. Do you agree that Alberta should become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? And if Alberta votes yes, that's the trigger, because where Alberta goes, Saskatchewan is likely to follow fast. And Manitoba, quiet Manitoba, suddenly becomes the kingmaker in the middle of the prairies. Step 2, the economic shockwave.
Off between last fiscal year into this one was stronger than we expected. I think that's definitely good news for this year.
Let's talk numbers. Remove Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba from Confederation, and Canada instantly loses 35% of its total export value, over 40% of its energy production. Billions in agricultural output, wheat, barley, canola, gone from Ottawa's trade portfolio. $17 billion in annual equalization that keeps Quebec and the Maritimes afloat. That's not a dent in the economy, that's an amputation. Step 3, the new alignments they already have. The oil and gas Alberta ships south every day, more than some OPEC countries. Saskatchewan's potash mines feeding global agriculture. Manitoba's hydroelectric grid tied directly into Minnesota and North Dakota. The U.S. is their biggest customer already. They wouldn't need to build new trade relationships. They'd just expand the ones they've got. A name to the 51st state temptation.
And it's not just Alberta, it's not just Sask. Parts of BC are expressing interest, along with Manitoba. So this is what's known as WEXIT, literally a western exit from the Confederation.
In Alberta, 20% of residents already say they'd back joining the U.S. outright. That number jumps in rural areas, where political culture aligns more with Montana or Texas than with Ottawa. Why go it alone when you can plug straight into the world's largest economy, inherit the world's most powerful military, and get instant access to U.S. infrastructure and trade deals? You're the NATO and Arctic wild card. If the prairies leave and align with the U.S., NATO's northern map changes overnight. The United States suddenly gets a massive Arctic flank, stretching from Alaska all the way across to Hudson Bay. That changes shipping, defense, and Arctic sovereignty forever. The domino effect. Northern British Columbia could be next. Quebec's separatists could relaunch. Suddenly, Canada's holding together with duct tape and nostalgia. Ottawa's nightmare. From Ottawa's perspective, this is the doomsday scenario, not because the West can't leave, but because they can. They have the resources, the markets, and the political will, and now they have the story. They won't even let us speak. The end game.
We're going to make Alberta great again, and that is when we cut ourselves off from the leech that is Eastern Canada.
If Ottawa digs in, the prairies call their referendum and history gets made. If Ottawa blinks, maybe there's a last-minute deal. But here's the thing. The West isn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. They're deciding if they even want to be in the same house. And after what happened this week, they might just start looking for a new address. Do you want me to also make a short viral-style cold open for this so it grabs viewers in the first 10 seconds like your Alberta 51st state script did? That way the hook matches perfectly.